Welcome to our snow day lab. I'll just walk you through the lab steps. All we would have done in class anyway is go through the steps, and then you would have had the time to work on it. And so I think you'll find it's pretty straightforward. Lab 4 is all about getting a first version of a data quality report organized. So using the techniques we talked about on Monday to understand our data, get a feel for the data, run statistical measures on the data, report on different issues with the data, all those types of things. That's what we want to be doing this week. So what you're going to do is bring some data into Weka and R, use the tools and types of reports and plots that we talked about and others that you think what might be interesting as you look at the documentation, and then submit this draft data quality report. That'll really be the goal for this week. My preference is that you use your data for your data set. The whole idea is to be advancing that data set, and first step obviously is to get a data quality report together so we can start to define what all the attributes are and the dynamics of those attributes and understand if there are any changes or new attributes you have to create out of it. But step one is understand the data that you have. If you don't yet have a data set decided on, you haven't downloaded it, it's not in the right format, what have you, I'm giving you a couple of data sets to try these techniques on, and you can use those. But again, it would be much more efficient for you to be using your own data. So if you have your own data set, you can skip worrying about anything further in terms of a data set that I would be providing. You'll use your own. Okay, so if you're going to use my data sets because you don't have yours, there are two data sets that will be available on Piazza. I want you to use both of them. They're different in terms of the types of reports you would create out of them. The first one is just a table of adult census data, so demographic and income data for adults. And the import statement is there to get it into R. It has a bunch of, it's not cleanly formatted, although it'll load as long as you strip the white space out of it. So that's what that read CSV with the extra parameter of strip white equals true means. Take out the white space, and it should load. And there's documentation also on Piazza in the adult names.txt file that explains at a high level what the different features are that are in there from essentially from a business perspective. And then the other data set is bank marketing data, so that's the bank all CSV. It actually doesn't use a comma to separate the data fields. It uses a semicolon. So again, with that read CSV, that's why it has the extra parameter there of sep equals semicolon. That's how you tell R to override the default separator, which would be a comma. And use the semicolon. That'll cause that data to load. And again, there's a bankallnames.txt file also on Piazza that at a high level explains the features that are in this file. So those two files are the ones you can load if you don't have your own data file to work with. Okay, so what do I want you to do in the lab? So what I want you to do is create your first version, your draft version of your data quality report. I would like you to name it DQR dot and then your ID and then .pdf. For each feature, I want you to account for that in the report. I would like you to build the report using something like OpenOffice or Word, something where you can format it, you can put headings in. You're going to want this to look like a semi-professional document, so it's easy for someone else who picks it up to read it, to find information in it. Any plots you generate should be right in line in it. So it should be a single document that we can use as a reference for your data. So in the DQR, you'll account for each feature and put in measures that are appropriate to the type of data, right? So if it's numeric data, you can give us statistical information. If it's some nominal value, counts of values, and the kind of the different values that are in the field, and then certainly things around the quality and whatnot of the data. You're going to create an R script, and I would like you to name that R script DQR dot, and then again your ID, your Linux ID dot R, and that script should be essentially the steps that you are going through with your data set to generate the data quality report in terms of the plots you're generating, the statistical measures you're generating, anything that you're doing where you're using R to extract information about your data. That should be in your script. That script should also be submitted along with your DQR, along with the data files. And I should be able to run that script and reproduce the plots and summaries that you're including in your document. Oh, and by the way, when you publish your document that you're creating in OpenOffice or Word, please publish it to a PDF, and it's the PDF that I'm more interested in having you submit. That way, it'll be formatted the way you want it, even if I'm not using the same program, OpenOffice or Word or what have you. Okay, so for plots, we talked about a variety of different plots. Make sure you choose appropriate plots for each of your attributes. I don't need to see, nor would you normally create individual scatter plots for every feature. You would certainly create a scatter plot matrix, at least for numeric types, and sometimes for nominals it's interesting. But again, you can look at that and see if it makes sense for your data. And then you would only create scatter plots if there was something special you really wanted to call out about the data to highlight it. If there was a strong correlation, you'd include it to help show that, yeah, there really is a strong correlation. Or if you're really arguing that there's no relationship to the target and maybe we should throw this attribute out, you might want to include a scatter plot to help clarify that. You're going to do most of the exploratory work in R. It is fine to load it into Weka, and it has, as we've seen, some easy ways to explore statistical measures about your data. But R's got a much richer set of capabilities in terms of generating output and statistics. So make sure you import your data into each tool just so you can kind of toy with it in those two environments. And if Weka or R defaults a feature to the wrong type, definitely make note of that in your DQR, because that's going to be something that you'll have to, anyone loading your data would have to be aware of, and they would have to know to correct that type after the fact. Otherwise, obviously, we won't be able to use it correctly. The machine learning won't use it correctly. So the data cleanup step would need to know to correct that. So make sure to highlight that stuff. The layout for your document, I would suggest you have an overview section that just describes the data set at a really high level. Where did it come from? What kinds of data are within it? Any thoughts on the quality of the data or what have you, company that collected it, and anything that would help someone understand the kind of the background of this data set and how it came to be, and help them judge its quality and reliability and age and whatnot. And then there should be a summary section that certainly has your scatter plot matrix, any correlation plots that you created, which again, similar to scatter plot matrices, would be looking across most of your features, and then any high-level notes overall about the data set's quality. If there seem to be a lot of missing values, or you think it's likely that things are going to have to be cleaned up because there's a lot of outliers or what have you, just kind of high-level thoughts about the data set, and just so we have a high-level feel about it. And then a details section where you list each one of your attributes and then report on statistical measures about it that are appropriate for the type of data. And so again, we talked about all those different plots. Pick things that make sense to help highlight each of the features, to help someone understand its range of values and specific issues with it. So you can use the R5 number summary for numeric values and bar plots and stuff. Histograms to help understand the breakdown of data, maybe in a nominal field. So pick appropriate plots to put in. Please do not use every type of plot for each attribute. That's not reasonable, and you wouldn't do it. You really want your plots to help someone understand the data, not just create a bunch of graphics just to fill up a document with pages and pages of plots. So certainly if two plots communicate the same thing, just pick one of them. And if there's no story to tell, then keep it simple. If the number summary does a good enough job and you don't really see a point to the plot, you can explain that if you want, that that it doesn't tell anything, but just don't overuse the plots. Okay, so at the end of this, what you should have is a document with your report in it. You should have an R script with all the steps that you took to generate the different plots and summaries. And you should have your data set, which is either the ones you downloaded from Piazza or your own. Those things all need to go into a Lab4 directory, and then you'll submit it using the normal process. The goal is, when I receive it, I should be able to run that R script and reproduce those summaries, and I should be able to access your data and kind of compare it to the DQR and get a feel myself for your data and quality issues and whatnot that you've identified. All right, so have fun with that. Any questions, let me know. But I think you'll find this lab is relatively straightforward. Thanks. One thing I almost forgot. There is a lab4.r file. It's essentially a file to demonstrate how to generate the different types of plots and summaries that we covered in class. It uses the infamous iris dataset, so that is also again copied up onto Piazza. The only difference with the other version that you had before is it's called Lab 4 Iris Data instead of whatever it was before, Lab 2 or 3. And so this is the top of that file. So you'll download that. It loads a bunch of libraries that are used for generating the different plots that we talked about. Core plot, obviously, for the correlation plots. Google Viz is kind of cool. It's a way to show the data in a tabular form, but using the browser, so it uses a nice font. Again, no requirement to use that, but I thought I'd show it to you. It's an interesting component you can load into R. And ggplot actually is an amazingly rich plotting environment. There are several books dedicated to learning ggplot. It's very complicated. Well, the design is straightforward, but it's got a lot of features. So I just thought I'd let you touch it a little bit, but again, you could spend an entire semester trying to master ggplot, but it's a good library to learn about. Then you'll see at the top of this file there is a function here, an R function. Again, this isn't an R programming class. This function is a way to, if you recall on the correlation plot, I showed you some where we put different information on the top of the diagonal versus the bottom of the diagonal. This function is a way to accomplish that. So in this case, it allows for the display of the Pearson R values in the correlation plot on the top or bottom half of the diagonal. And so that's what that's there for. You'll see it being used later in the script. And then you'll see normal R steps that we've taken, right? Loading our data file, and you'll start to see it call different functions and plot different things. I've tried to comment what each of these function calls is doing in terms of the type plot it is creating, and how the data is. It's important to understand how the data is being subsetted. So, for instance, creating a 5-number summary here specifically for one of the columns in the iris data set. This is the syntax in R. This says get me all the values from column 1. So things like that. So just kind of giving you a little bit of a feel. If you're not an expert in R, that's absolutely fine. Hopefully there's enough in here to help you navigate your way through your own data set, or through the ones you download from Piazza. But again, each of the plots we talked about in class is accounted for here. So if there's anything you can't figure out, just let me know, and we should be able to get that resolved pretty quickly. But hopefully you'll find this helpful as a way to understand, okay, how do I create all these different things that we talked about in class, including the exciting Chernoff faces are in here as well. All right, so have fun with that, and enjoy your snow time, and I will hopefully see you the following Monday. Thanks.